to access interpretation services for today's meeting.
Good morning, and thank you. We'll begin with the instructions in Spanish. I'll be back with the instructions in English. Muy buenos días. Para quienes nos acompañan vía Zoom, se está ofreciendo interpretación simultánea para esta sesión. Como pueden ver en pantalla, para acceder al servicio, solo es necesario que se desplace a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen sus controles, hacer clic en el icono de interpretación, el globito terráqueo, y seleccionar Spanish o español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom en celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, más, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Por último, si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio o silenciar audio original. Once again, for those who are joining us via Zoom, interpretation is being provided to and from Spanish. To use the feature, please scroll down to the bottom of the Zoom screen where your meeting controls are. There you would click on the interpretation icon and select English as your language. For those joining through the mobile app, you would need to press the ellipsis, the three dots, then interpretation, and then choose your language. And finally, click on Mute Original Audio to not hear the Spanish law in the background. Para quienes nos acompañan hoy en la sala de juntas de SANDAG y necesitan interpretación al español, por favor diríjanse a la recepción y soliciten un receptor. Este parece un pequeño iPod y puede utilizarse para escuchar la reunión en español. Simplemente sostiene el auricular junto a su oído y la interpretación comenzará automáticamente. Now, if you are joining us in person at SANDAG and need interpretation into English, please check out a headset from the receptionist on the 7th floor. It looks like a little iPod, and it comes with an earpiece that you can use to hear any Spanish comments or questions translated back into English. Simply hold the earpiece to your ear, and the interpreter will come on automatically. Gracias, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlos. I will now ask our clerk to confirm that we have a quorum.
Yes, we do have a quorum.
Thank you. For the record, Francesca has confirmed we have a quorum once again. Thank you so much, Francesca. And good morning, everyone, again, and welcome to the May 10 meeting of the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee. As always, thank you to staff for all their efforts in pulling this meeting together. Just very quickly, this meeting today, we will take in-person public comments followed by virtual public comments. And if you are the member of the public here in the room, please submit a speaker slip to the clerk. And for those of you joining us virtually, please continue to raise your hands at the right time. Public comment is possible both in person and via Zoom. At this time, I will ask SANDAG's financial programming analyst, Michael Turlip, to provide a quick reminder on how the public and member comments will work.
Thank you, Chair Frankel. So we will be taking both in-person and virtual public comments. As noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda, in addition to emailing comments, the public may also provide live comments during today's meeting. In order to provide live comments, you can join today's Zoom meeting through the link or by dialing one of the numbers from your phone that are provided on the cover page of today's meeting agenda. Join the meeting by clicking on the Join Webinar link provided in the confirmation email you'll receive upon registering. When the public comments are called for on an item on the Zoom platform, click on the raise hand icon in the Zoom toolbar. The chair will call on you by the name you provided. If you are participating by telephone, press *9. The chair will call on you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number. The instructions for providing live comments are also on the bottom of the cover page of today's meeting agenda, which can be accessed from the homepage of SANDAG's website at www.sandag.org. All comments, whether emailed or live, will be made a part of today's meeting record. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. Okay, we'll move to our agenda item number 1. This is public comments, communications, and member comments. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to address the committee on an item not on today's agenda. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments?
Thank you, Chair. We do have one public comment. Michael Kenny would like to say a few words.
Well, good morning. I have good news and news. I'll be, well, the good news is I'm taking a position with the County of San Diego. I'll be the county traffic engineer. I'm very excited about that. Unfortunately, I can't continue as a member of the ITOC. For that reason, member agency employees are not eligible to serve on the ITOC. So with some regret, I have to step down. I wanted to just thank my fellow committee members or wish you the best. It was a pleasure to serve with you. And to staff, you were very professional in everything you did for me. It helped me out. So thank you for that. And with that, I'll say goodbye. I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Michael, for your service here. You will be missed, and best of luck at the county implementing that VMT framework. Good luck. Okay, Madam Clerk, do we have any other public comments today?
No, Chair, that concludes the commenters.
Thank you. We'll bring it back to committee members. Any committee members with public comments? No, okay. Seeing none, that concludes item 1, and we'll move to item 2, which is our agency report. And we will hear from Mr. Dujon. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Frankel. Good morning, committee members. So on May 4th, we kicked off the Bike Month by celebrating the groundbreaking of the Border to Bayshore Bikeway. Since 2015, we've been working on this almost 7-mile route to connect Imperial Beach, the San Ysidro community, and the busiest international land border crossing in the world. We'll continue celebrating with Bike Anyway Day on May 18th. The pit stop map was released last week with more than 100 pit stops, including at least one per city. The city of Lemon Grove and the San Diego County have also supported the event by adopting Bike Month proclamations in their own communities. On Friday, part 2 of the contracts audit is going to the audit committee. It will go to the board later this month. This audit will help us see what we're doing well and where we can improve. The agency is already working on a new ERP system. This major undertaking will address the majority of the findings in the contracts audit. We'll continue to strengthen policies and procedures around contracting with vendors. We'll also provide better real-time information on the financial status of projects. Also on Friday, probably one of the most important documents that we take is the 24 budget is going to the board for final approval. Approval of the budget will allow us to release funding and pass through monies to jurisdictions for their projects. In our priority projects, the governor recently announced a $100 million grant award to SANDAG and NCTD for the San Dieguito Bridge Replacement and Double Track project. We've been working very closely with NCTD to get funding to complete this project. And we are proud to have received the largest award in the state. The importance of our work on the Low-San corridor is underscored by the most recent bluffs collapse in San Clemente, which once again has shut down the rail service through the area. We're also making progress on the Otay Mesa East Port of Entry project. Agency and board leadership have been meeting with the Department of Transportation, CBP, or the Customs and Border Protection, the General Service Administration, to discuss the funding and strategy for this project. We are working towards an agreement with these federal partners, which will enable us to move forward with the design for the port of entry. The Central Mobility Hub project was also progressing as we work to bring a transit connection to the San Diego airport. The team released the draft comprehensive multimodal corridor project to the public for comment through June 5th. Completion of the study enables us to apply for SB1 funding. Staff are working on a report on the Blue and Purple Line study, with the study itself expected to start later this summer. Thank you, Chair. That concludes my report.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dujon. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, Chair, we do not.
Thank you. Bring it back to committee members. Any comments for Andre this morning? Yes, Dustin.
Thank you, Andre. I appreciate the update. Very happy to hear about the $100 million for the Low-San corridor and specifically the double track at San Dieguito. Do you know what's the total cost for that project now? I just remember back in 2010, it was like 87 million, and now I think it's significantly larger. Just curious if this 100 million will get us to the finish line with that, or we're still a ways off.
Yeah, so we're finishing up the design right now for the San Dieguito, and we've actually broken that project out into 2 different CIPs, into 2 phases for construction. So we have construction phase 1 that's supposed to be starting next year, and with this phase 2 construction, getting this additional 100 million. As it stands right now, we probably need significant more money in order to complete the cost for phase 2, but we don't know the exact estimated cost yet. They're still figuring that out through the completion through design. So once design, because that's for both phases, has been completed, then we'll have an updated cost.
And just so you're aware, we have put in for a federal state partnership grant for another 100 million, 130 million for phase 2 construction. So we would find out about that in October.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments in the agency report? Okay, seeing none. Thank you so much, Andre. We will move to our consent calendar today. We currently have 9 items on consent. And Madam Clerk, are there any public comments on the consent agenda today?
Thank you, Chair. We have no public comments.
Thank you. So we'll bring it back to committee members. Any questions, comments, anything need to be pulled from consent? Yes, Sunny.
I have a comment about the amendments, the RTIP amendments. If there is a way we can get a little bit more explanation on the reason for change. Usually in the tables, it just says reason for change, increased funding, but that doesn't explain, or if the price has gone or the cost has gone up, it doesn't really explain why. So if we have a little bit more understanding of the reason, especially things that are over 50% increase or something like that would be helpful.
Okay, so you're asking for something that's significant. You want a little bit more explanation for those.
Yeah,
Okay.
in the table, there is a place in the individual
Mhm.
project table, there's a place that says reason for change. But then it just says increased funding. That's not a reason.
Gotcha.
So it'd be nice to have that.
Okay.
Sunny, I know Mr. Radcliffe is here this morning. Richard is here. Is there any, any kind of specific change or line item that perhaps we could get a little bit more
Sure.
information on?
Yeah,
From
the
Richard.
table that was provided, it's page 51 of the packet. And I noticed there was just group projects for bicycle pedestrian facilities. There was a 74% change. So, and the top three basically had very high changes. So is that because the cost has gone up, or, they're like over 100%, 185%, 108, or is it you just got extra funding, or?
So that one, the top line, for instance, is that one went up that much because there was a newly awarded project. I believe it was City of Chula Vista.
Okay.
And those do not show because we do not provide the group project listings
Okay.
to you guys as an attachment, and that's where they would typically show.
Okay. Okay. So is there a way to somewhere put in, or maybe even in your memo, maybe in the memo, just a bullet of why that increase?
Sure.
I mean, it's great that, we got more projects added. So, but it'd just be nice. So that way I don't have to pull it and ask. the
Sure.
question.
Yeah, I'm happy to include more detailed changes and
Yeah.
more specifics as to which projects exactly went up or down in the report, if that will help you.
Yeah, that would be great. I'm more interested in the significant changes. Anything over 50% is like, okay, what happened here? So.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Sunny. Thank you so much, Richard. Yeah, Stuart.
Just a question maybe for Andre that's, I think, covered in one of the consent items. Could you just speak to, with the, a couple of regional bank failures, could you just speak to just review for everybody's edification, status of our cash management, and if that's caused you to do any rethinking in terms of our investment portfolio? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Stuart. I think in general, we have no exposure to the regional banks. Now, one of our vendors does have an escrow account with Pacific West Bank, which is on our books, but that's not related specifically to SANDAG. So whenever we cut them a check, there's a 10% retention amount that we keep until the project's over. So they've kept their money at the Pacific West Bank. But generally, we're not exposed to the regional banks. We have two portfolio managers, one with PFM Asset Management, the other one with Inside Investments. And obviously, as soon as the regional bank crisis happened, we contacted both of them, and they are not on their approved list as far as investments. We do have exposure to the bigger banks, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, but those are not impacted by, I guess, the issue at hand right now. So pleased to announce that we have no exposure except for the one Pacific West Bank, which is not really our account anyway. It's just an escrow. And in general, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, our portfolio has done tremendously well over the last year. Just a year and a half ago, we were earning less than 0.5% of interest. Today, we're earning closer to 3.5%. By the end of this quarter, we'll be closer to 4%. So with $1 billion of investment that we have at 4%, that's about 40 million of money, which is really something that we can actually put into our budget. Before it was almost like decimal dust amount of earnings that we're getting. But, although rising interest rates are generally not a good thing for the economy. They try to slow down the economy. For us, it's been a good thing because the portfolio that we have has really gone up tremendously in interest earnings.
Andre, related to that, I have a question about, I think CPI came out today. There was a new reading. Do we see any relationship between the construction cost index and CPI? I mean, is there kind of generally, what have you seen? I know that we have the kind of LA area publishes a construction cost index, and have we seen that? Is it vastly different? Is it somewhat similar? What's the?
We were just talking this morning about the fact that the inflation came down a notch from 5% to 4.9%. So I think Marcia will be probably best to answer that question.
Good morning, Chair Frankel. I'm Marcia Smith, the Associate Economic Research Analyst at SANDAG. And yes, there are some connections, mainly because consumer price index reflects all items. When you look at construction cost index, you have things like labor and materials, which are also affected by inflationary conditions. We've been tracking CCI very close through using the engineering and news record out of LA, and it is very much a concern that could impact the cost of projects that SANDAG has underway.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments about the consent agenda today?
Just like to move to approve.
Thank you. A motion for approval by Sunny. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Stewart. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. For CEO Private Sector, Sunny House.
Approved.
For Finance and Budgeting, Stuart Halpern.
Approved.
For Real Estate Right-of-Way Acquisition, Chair Frankel.
Approve.
For Biology Environmental, Dustin Fuller.
Approve.
For Licensed Engineer, Les Hopper.
Approve.
Licensed Civil Traffic Engineer is absent. And for Contractor Construction, Vice Chair Orso Delgado.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And that motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to our report segment of the agenda today, and that starts with item 12. And this is an item that is, of course, very bittersweet for us here as committee members. And the resignation by Mr. Kenny was not planned, and so we were planning today to acknowledge and recognize the work of Dustin Fuller and, of course, Stuart Halpern, who are members that have served for a very long time here on the committee and have provided and really been a tremendous asset in both their insight and their willingness to contribute to the success of the committee. So I know that I am here because of Stuart. We had a mutual friend and I was having breakfast with him one day. And he said, "Hey, you should really talk to my friend Stuart. And I think you may be a good fit for the iTalk." And we got together. And so thank you, Stuart, for recruiting me and allowing me to be here to serve. And I've always really enjoyed working with you. And to Dustin, you will be missed very much as well. And your experience working in North County for the Agricultural Association and all of your knowledge is really, really helpful in especially EMP related issues. As we get those reports, I think everybody kind of looks to you to figure out what we should be doing or not doing and how things are going. It's hard to evaluate some of these performance metrics for establishment, reestablishment of these habitats and to figure all that out. So you'll both be very much missed. Thank you so much for your service. And of course, I'd like to give any of my colleagues an opportunity to say a few words as well. Yes, Sunny.
I just want to thank both of you for your service, particularly Stuart, as serving as my vice chair. I learned a lot from you. That was my second year into this, into the committee, and I picked a really good person, and I was so glad that you actually stepped up and helped me and provided me a lot of guidance. And I really appreciate that. You really are going to be missed, both of you, because you have so much experience and you've been, here for such a long time. We're all newbies. So it's going to be an interesting job going forward. But thank you both.
I agree with Sunny. I mean, the institutional knowledge that both of you bring is something that is going to be dearly missed. So hopefully we can call upon you once in a while and just chat, So There you go. Congratulations and thank you for all your hard work.
Yeah, I don't want to be left out. So likewise, and Stuart, I think you're an economics data geek like I am. And so I'm really going to miss your delving into the numbers. And I'm sure all the questions you're asking, we're going to have to try and fill those shoes. And Dustin, same with you. I think Jonathan covered that, but we're really going to miss you guys because we're going to have a hard time making a quorum going forward. So maybe we can extend. Anyway, thanks for all your hard work, guys.
Gentlemen, if you like to say something, you feel free, but you're not obligated, not obligated.
Well, thanks. I appreciate everybody's kind words. Pedro, to your point, certainly we wouldn't not pick up a phone call, but we don't expect there'll be many. However, we do expect you to carry the torch on the city of San Diego streets and road cash balances and making sure they continue to spend that down. Jonathan Tibbetts sort of passed it on to me, and so yes, I'm going to pass that on to you. But it's been an honor and a pleasure to work with everybody, to get to know the staff. Some of whom probably won't miss us quite so much, and these questions that we always needle them with, but really appreciate the kind words. Thank you. I'll miss you guys.
Same thing. Thank you guys for the kind words. Unfortunately, there wasn't as much environmental stuff on a regular basis as I would have liked. Much more financial, which is not in my wheelhouse. In terms of calls, I'm going to be at every meeting, so you don't have to call me. Be here. No, I'm kidding. I just come for the lunches afterwards.
There you go.
No, but I appreciate the kind words, and fortunately, where I work, I'll still be able to work with a lot of SANDAG folks, W19 and the double track bridge replacement project. So yeah, thank you all and keep it going forward. I expect great things from this committee.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, Chair, we do not.
Okay.
Chair, if I may, on Friday for the board, we will be recognizing the outgoing members. So it will be a comment. Okay. Though we lost my train of thought.
No problem.
Thank you. The board on Friday, well, we have a recognition on Friday for all three, actually. And then we did have a subcommittee choose 2 new members to replace. We can't really replace you, but to fill your seats. And then we will be soliciting for Michael Kenny's position. So we do encourage word of mouth. I know everybody, a lot of you come on here because you've been recruited by a previous ITALK member. So if you know anybody that could fill in as the civil engineer, then that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do believe we have one public comment.
My apologies. I had my item numbers.
Dr. Bilaashka, hello. Good morning.
Good morning, committee. I just wanted to extend my personal thanks to the 2 members who are leaving. I've had some discussions with them, and their doggedness and expertise is appreciated. And I would hope they would make some input in terms of the replacements for the ITALK committee to try to fill your shoes. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bilaashka. Okay, that concludes this item. And so we will move on to item number 3, which is the appointment of fiscal year 2023 fiscal and compliance audit subcommittee members. And we're going to hear from Marcus on this item.
Hello, good morning, Chair and members of the ITALK. I'm Marcus Pasquale with the Finance Department. Before I start, I also just want to thank Stuart and Dustin for their service, highly appreciated. This item is to appoint the fiscal year 23 fiscal and compliance audit subcommittee members. Before we appoint the members, I will go over some background information and timelines. The TransNet fiscal year 23 fiscal and compliance audit process is scheduled to begin in July. The ITALK is asked to appoint no more than 3 voting members to serve on the FY23 Fiscal and Compliance Audit Subcommittee. Generally, the process is that the draft FY23 agreed upon procedures are sent to the auditors. The auditors will then incorporate any updates or changes they may have. The auditors will then forward these changes to the subcommittee members for review, comments, or updates needed. The final agreed upon procedures will then be presented to ITALK on the July 12th meeting. The fiscal year 22 subcommittee members were Stuart Halpern, Pedro Orso Delgado, Michael Kenny, and Tracy Drager. So at this time, do we have any volunteers for the fiscal year 23 audit?
Okay, thank you, Marcus. And given Mr. Kenny's resignation and the 2 outgoing members, that leaves 4 of us remaining here. And I do believe we're going to have new members joining us next month. And so that will be at least 2, correct? 2 new members, brand new members. So we can keep that in mind as well. But do we have any amongst the 4 of us, any volunteers?
So we need to choose from this group. Members.
No, I certainly.
Choose them, recruit them.
Yeah, I certainly think an option would be to wait, to postpone, to defer this item till perhaps the next meeting, if that's the timing from staff, if that works. I don't know.
But I would like to serve. We can always see who is interested, and if we're missing other committee members, subcommittee members, because it's up to 3, correct?
That's correct.
So then it's just, to me, having a brand new person come in on an audit the committee might be too much of us expecting them, because I remember the first year that I started. So, but anyway, I would like to volunteer.
Thank you, Sunny. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Les.
So I don't know the background of the individual who's going to sit in this, sort of municipal finance sort of budget seat. I'm sorry? Oh, I don't know the person. But... Okay, but in any case, just by nature of the qualifications that are supposed to be part of this seat, it might be worth considering whether, with respect to your comments about newness, whether that person may inherently have the kind of background that would be compatible with this committee. And so that I'd leave that to you guys, obviously, to decide.
I sat on the selection. You want to talk about?
So Miriam actually served on the ITALK back when it first started.
Yeah,
for
so
a few years. So she does have some background in the ITALK.
And she will be in the finance position, correct?
Okay.
Yeah, 2 at least.
Yeah, so we have 2 volunteers at this time. So I think we can entertain a motion on the 2 volunteers. And then I think we could ask our new member, perhaps if they were interested as well, and then bring back another item. I don't know formally if we'd have to agendize that and put it on for another motion. Okay, at our future meeting. Okay, well, I would then be happy to make the motion to appoint Sunny House and Les Hopper to the fiscal year 2023 Fiscal and Compliance Audit Subcommittee.
I will second that.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. For CEO Private Sector, Sunny House.
Yes.
For Finance and Budgeting, Stuart Halpern.
Yes.
For Real Estate Right-of-Way Acquisition, Chair Frankel.
Yes.
For Biology Environmental, Dustin Fuller.
Yes.
For Licensed Engineer, Les Hopper.
Yes.
And for Contractor Construction, Licensed Civil Traffic Engineer is absent. And for Contractor Construction, Vice Chair Orso Delgado.
Yes.
Thank you. And that motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Thank you, Francesca. I think I neglected to ask if there were any public comments on this item.
We did not have any public comments.
Thank you. Okay, excellent. We will move on to item number 14 on today's agenda. This is related to the triennial performance audit and as potentially draft topics. And I'll be introducing this item and soliciting feedback from the committee members. And I don't know if we have the slide that shows our potential topics available. Maybe it's part of the presentation. But in any case, we met we've been meeting as a subcommittee to talk about the topics for the triennial performance audit. And so we thought that it would be prudent to get feedback from the other members of the committee. And so certainly, especially with our two members leaving, in particular Stuart, we wanted to provide this opportunity. And so we did have a list of topics that hopefully we can display on the screen. I know that it was included in the agenda packet about kind of these issues that we may want the auditor to kind of take a deep dive into. Great. Yeah, thank you so much to staff. So this attachment 1 is kind of our initial thinking about performance audit focus areas and how that would work. So we have a number of items on this list. One is our kind of detailed ordinance risk assessment, to a more general item to better identify areas of greatest risk or sensitivity. And then there's a number of kind of subtopics. I won't go through each one of them, but here we tend to focus on AB 805 and the impact of AB 805 on board composition, kind of the harmony, and ultimately votes, and how that works. Additionally, I suggested that for a grant program like our Smart Growth Incentive Program funds, I'm interested in understanding outcomes with a grant program like that. So the intention is to facilitate the development of housing in areas adjacent to transit and other priority areas. And I'm interested to know whether that is actually happening, whether these funds are being used in a way that actually is achieving the objectives of the program. The second topic is related, the kind of overarching theme is related to the RTP and impacts on the portfolio of TransNet projects. We see their potential to be a conflict between the current RTP and the TransNet ordinance, especially in the kind of program of projects. And so we wanted to dig into that a little bit more deeply and understand whether we can establish prioritization criteria for to kind of see if we can reconcile or try and reconcile some of these things. The third item is related to SANDAG staffing and workload. A look at the adjustment of the administrative expense limitation from 1% to 2%. And taking a real look at future costs and demands on staff time. Fourth topic related to the 5 big moves. And analyzing how this policy shift that's kind of implemented by the RTP affects the board and risks associated with some of these larger kind of visioning projects like the Central Mobility Hub and others. And then number 5 is cost escalation methodology for the TransNet drawdown. And really how we kind of, this is a little bit more of a technical item, but how do we look at cost escalation and how do we address that as we move forward as the TransNet program continues to be implemented. So with that, those were the kind of 5 general items and topics that we had. We would love to get feedback from committee members on items that we think we missed, items should be added, any feedback or comments on these topics. So with that, I'll stop there and turn it over to my colleagues here. Stuart?
Thanks. I have a couple related to what I think would be item 1 here, or the first general category. I presume you had these conversations with me in the meeting with the auditors, right? So you were informed, but because, and maybe I'm not remembering correctly, but my recollection is, I think it was the last Triennial Performance Audit, or may have been the one before that, they actually did an assessment of AB 805 and its impact on actual TransNet votes. My vague recollection is they said there are actually only 2 or 3 TransNet related votes that didn't impact allocation of funds or projects, what have you. But I think it's obviously a hot topic. If there are ways that they can do a deeper but different dive than they did last time, I think that would be great. There, I guess, 2 other things that relate to this broad category of governance, if I could. I think it may have been the board's own 10-year look back that kind of put onto the, or maybe it was one of our trial performance audits or both that put onto the agenda this topic that we touched briefly on last time about, you know, the allocation of funds, right? And the 70-30 split. And, you know, just it's curious that it's taken at least 3 years since that was first brought up. And we're still waiting to see what that resolution is going to be. I'm not sure how you neatly package that into an audit question, but I think it does relate to this broad area of, you know, governance and process. And, you know, if this is something that was identified as a concern through a couple of audits, you know, kind of comes up all the time with people talking about needing more money for street and local road improvement. It's like, does it really, is there a way for this not to take 3+ years to make a change that various people are suggesting? You know, the organization probably can better serve its mission if we actually make a change. So I don't know, again, how you wrap that into whether your existing notions or if that's a little bit of something new, but I would consider using that as a case study of how we actually implement change. And then the last thing is it also relates to things that we've talked about in the past, but I have to say, you know, in my experience, one of the biggest challenges of the organization and board governance relates to the complexity of the organization, right? And so in a prior audit, we asked the auditors to just look at board packages and to the degree to which board members and, you know, ourselves as committee members kind of get overloaded with the volume of information that's presented. And they did a comparison of our average board package size with other entities, which is kind of interesting. You know, and I think the reports that comprise the packages have evolved somewhat. We've added a little bit of focus in those little boxes in the upper right-hand corner. Personally, I would like to find a way and have some conversation with the auditors if that's an area that they can pursue further. It strikes me that a lot of the packages, you know, with respect to all the work that goes into them, are not as effective as they might be in framing decisions for decision makers. I think there's a certain amount of let's throw all the information anybody could possibly ever ask for into the package. And I don't know if it's driven by a legal perspective, which is we want to make sure we have every piece of information in there so nobody sues us because we didn't provide the information. But I think what happens is, I think it's still sort of overwhelming for people. I mean, just, you know, ourselves, how often is it that you've actually gotten through the entire package for one of our meetings? And we actually don't make the important decisions, the board members do, and their packages tend to be bigger. You know, if you look at the experience we had trying to get our proposed ordinance amendments passed, and for those of you who were there, you remember that board members raised the issue of the 1% change, the 2%. Board members who voted on it didn't remember. They were saying, like, what is this? They didn't remember actually something that was, you know, a non-trivial thing that they themselves had voted for. To me, it speaks for the fact that, you know, these people are often overwhelmed with the amount of information they get, and that we all, or, you know, you going forward in combination with just whatever you can do to improve the ability for people to digest and make informed decisions, I think is going to be hugely impactful. Because, you know, in contrast to ourselves, almost all board members have a full-time job. They have their elected office. SANDAG is kind of like their third gig, and probably most of them are parents and have family responsibilities. And so if you weigh that in combination with getting, you know, 200+ page packages where the reports don't really synthesize a lot of the decisions as effectively as I think they might, it just leaves the door open to, you know, decision making that isn't really as fully informed as I think we'd all like it to be. So, that's a lot of words. I guess I would just succinctly say, from my own perspective, if there's a way to do a little bit of a deeper dive into how to make the decision-making packages more digestible, I think that would do a huge service to everyone. If nothing else, like, and I don't know what the agency does or doesn't do in this regard, but does anybody ever ask the board members, how they feel the packages do or don't serve their needs as decision makers? Just constantly getting some feedback, I think, is having a culture of constant improvement in this regard, I think would just be hugely impactful. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Stuart. Appreciate those insights. Sunny?
I just would like to get a point of clarification. The 70-30 issue that you talked about, are you really more interested in the amount of time that it took SANDAG to actually look into and maybe do something about it, or the actual 70-30? Because I thought the mobility working group was going to be looking at that. And that kind of got stuck in the fact that the committees changed and mobility group had to be formed. So there were some reasons for the delay. So what is it exactly?
Yeah, no, I'm speaking exactly to just the length of the process. And, I understand there's always a balance between action and controls and, governance. But again, this is, and some of you may recall better than I, that it just strikes me that it was over 3 years ago that this is first brought up, and we're still in the working group phase, which God knows the working group is what the time frame actually is for the working group to bring a formal recommendation to the board. That's probably another year or two.
Right.
So I'm talking about timing.
Got it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I know as to the working group, I believe they've been, considering a package of ordinance amendments that staff does intend to bring to the board at some point relatively soon. Is that still the case?
Yeah, so as part of on your consent item, there's an updated work plan, which actually does slow the working group down. We were moving at a very quick pace and it was too much for the subcommittee. So we've decided to kind of slow it down so that we can make sure that we make informed decisions. They will go back to the mobility working group with their decisions, and the mobility working group will then take it to the board and to ITALK. They'll come back to ITALK.
What do you expect the overall timing? I know it's in the packet, but
it's okay. We're looking somewhere by the end of 2024. Because it's going to be all of the amendments together. So instead of taking one by one, the plan is to take them all together. So we want to make sure that we have all of them done, agreed upon, and put together as one package.
Yeah. So no, certainly. I mean, it's a lot of time to implement. I think, the bundled nature of everything maybe makes it a little bit more complicated. And so instead of focusing on one area, like, hey, let's look at 70-30 split, they're bundling a lot of other amendments together. But I think in an effort to try and reconcile the ordinance with the RTP to some extent. So I think it would be interesting to look at, maybe, a little bit more precise in terms of, Stuart's correct. We did look at AB 805 generally in the last performance audit. And they generally found there was no impact. So I'm wondering on these more significant amendments, policy related decisions, to kind of focus in on to what extent does AB 805 complicate the ability to take action in a timely manner. Now you're thinking about the dynamics and I don't know if that's kind of auditable. I don't know, exactly how we would make that a precise kind of question for the auditor, but I appreciate those comments, Stuart. And, we have a lot of process and, we want to look at outcomes too.
One of the things that to me would be very interesting is to look at the performance of how we have, part of it is here where we talk about the cost escalations and how we look at cost increases and how do we look at budgeting for all of that. But also, to me, it would be interesting in looking at a little bit of historical data from, we have a wealth of information available through all of the contracts that we have let out, both construction and consultant contracts. And to me, it would be interesting to look at how do we look at those performances is how have we done? How many times have we gone back and looked at budget increases in both construction and consultant contracts? Some of the reasons behind that as a way of trying to learn from that past and doing things differently in the future. And looking at setting up trends that maybe we can estimate. I know that there is some deep dives into consultant contracts right now through the audit committee and stuff like that. I don't know that I would want to recreate that, but I would want to look at the past and how can we do things a little bit differently. Some of that is in all of these different teams that we have here. I'm wondering if we could just focus that a little bit more.
Thank you, Pedro. Justin?
I don't really have a whole lot to add. I'm assuming that the EMP and the environmental aspect was looked at and probably in pretty good condition, as I recall. I am happy to see the 5 big moves on there. There's always kind of, I wanted to get a better understanding of those, and having some auditor assessment of it would be beneficial. And I want to thank you guys for, this is very thorough. I know you can go into so many different areas with the audit, but taking the time to create a nice thorough list, and looking forward to seeing what the auditors come back with.
Thanks, Justin. Stuart?
Just as a question, in going through this list with the auditors, is this a menu of possibilities which would then get narrowed down, or did you actually get into the discussion of whether they have sufficient capacity within the budget to actually do all this stuff? It's a very impressive, but at the same time ambitious agenda. So maybe if you could speak to that. Thanks.
Yes. So I think this is probably a little bit much for one audit, but we kind of wanted to lay out kind of all areas of interest. So I think we're going to narrow this. We're going to get some feedback from the auditor about the final scope, and they're going to come back to us, I think, with a better sense of what they can actually achieve within the budget and the time frame that they have. But this was kind of the vision list. It was, everything that we may be interested in and trying to understand whether it was appropriate or for an audit and how we may look at it. And so we're going to get some additional feedback from the auditor on that. Yes, Sunny.
This may not be the list. It may be that we need to add other things that come up from interviews. So I think the subcommittee will then need to look at and see within the budget what is able to be done and prioritize then the list of items. So.
Yes, Pedro.
Do we have a schedule of when some of these things will be happening?
Yeah. Staff, do you know? Can we get an
We do
update?
have a draft schedule. I don't have it with me, but we can provide it if necessary. Yeah.
Thank you.
But it is basically to be done before the end of next fiscal year, right? It's for 2024.
Yes, so we would
Okay.
start it in July, and we would, I believe they want to complete all their interviews and everything by the end of the year. And then we would come back early next year. They would come back early next year with some recommendations.
The data gathering component is first this year, and then we'll finalize the kind of scope early next. Okay, well, this has been really helpful as a subcommittee member. Thank you. Any final comments on this? No? Okay. Francesca, do we have any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair. We have one. Excuse me, Tim Bilash. You can go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, committee. Timothy Bilash, Mid-County Coastal Delmar area. Thank you for this discussion. And again, thanks for the subcommittee. I don't feel qualified to talk about auditing. I certainly don't even feel qualified to talk about accounting, certainly not finance, but I thank the information that's brought forward in the past meetings and continues. I want to echo Stuart Halpern's comments. I swear I think he's psychic, because I'd like to speak a little bit about, first on Monday, I mentioned at the meeting, the ITALK meeting, that perhaps a 30-minute prequel to meetings where not the presentations of the discussion topics, but kind of a guide to what will be discussed for the uninitiated. Maybe 30 minutes before, it could be online with one of the staff members to just run through and help orient all the topics that sometimes come up so that it's better understood. There are a number of public comments over the last 2 years I've heard that have to do with money. And yet I don't know how many are online, but it's so difficult. Most people don't have the capacity to really know anything unless a Friday there was an audit report released. I was here at one of the meetings. I read about it online. And so the communication with so many different committee members and so many different agencies and so much details about this, particularly the financial, I thought that might be something useful to think about. The other thing that I see as a public member is any opportunities to make it clear to the local communities or agencies or whatevers that make this up, how they benefit from what's going on. We really don't need to be knowing all the details of things we have nothing in common with. On the other hand, the scope of SANDAG is so big, people do not realize. And so auditing is one of those thankless tasks. I really appreciate the expertise brought to that. As far as I'm concerned, the more eyeballs on budgets, the better. And it provides better transparency and opportunities for the public to come and you know, organize their own ideas about, and not just worry about their own part. And in terms of having one major report that comes out that you have to digest in a day or two or a week, that makes it hard as a public person. And so if there's any way to get parts of that out in some form ahead of time, I think it would go a long way to the goals of the committee. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bilash. Okay, we'll take all this into consideration. I think that concludes this item 14, and we will move on to item 15, which is the draft 2023 ITALK annual report. And we're asked to review and discuss the draft of the report. And I'm going to recognize Michael for the presentation. Hi, Michael.
Good morning, members of the ITALK. I'm excited to be here to present the first draft of the 2023 ITALK annual report. At your February 8th meeting, the ITALK gave direction to staff to begin developing the first draft of the annual report. And thanks to staff's efforts, the first draft has been completed for your consideration. What we're asking today from the committee is to review this first draft and then please give any recommendations, feedback, or comments that you may have. And so without further ado, I'm going to go over the annual report section by section. If you'd please follow along with the copy in your agenda packet. So the annual report starts with a letter from the chair, which gives an overview of the ITALK's direction for the future, key accomplishments, along with an overview of what the annual report covers. On page 2, there's a section covering the 2023 and 2024 ITALK goals, along with the status update for each goal. From page 3 is the results from the FY 2021 and FY 2018 triennial performance audits, along with the progress made on recommendations. On page 5 will be a section on the fiscal and compliance audit results. It is currently blank because the audit is yet to be completed. On page 6 is funding highlights for FY 2023 through 2027, along with charts comparing TransNet dollars to other funding types, and a breakdown of funding by TransNet sub-program. From page 7, there is a progress highlight section covering priority projects and key initiatives, with descriptions of accomplishments and upcoming milestones. And lastly, on page 11, there's a section on how readers may get involved, access ITALK meetings, ask questions, and more. So now that we've gone over the draft, I think it's important to mention a few things. The scope of work for the FY 2024 triennial performance audit and the FY 2022 fiscal and compliance audit have yet to be completed. As a result, these sections are either missing or incomplete in the current draft of the audit, or not the audit, of the annual report, but they can be expected to be included in the next draft of the annual report. Subsequently, the planned timeline for the final draft of the annual report is being delayed from June to July. Lastly, on the project highlight section, we plan on expanding the project type indicators to include indicators for bike programs and grant programs at the top of the page. All right, so if there are any changes the committee would like to see, staff will go ahead and implement that into your annual report, and then we can bring an updated draft to your next meeting for further review and discussion. Thank you. That concludes our presentation, and we're open to answer any questions that you guys may have.
Thank you very much, Michael, for your presentation. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, Chair, we do not.
Thank you. So we'll bring it back to committee members for comments and discussion about the annual report. Les.
Thanks, Jonathan. So I'm looking at the goals on, I think it's page 2, and the SANDAG goals for ITALK number 2 is exactly what Stuart and Tim just brought up about making things more transparent or simplistic to digest. At least that's how I'm reading that. And so I'm curious, you know, if that's one of our goals for the year, how is that going to be implemented? Are we going to do it at these meetings and discuss it, or are we going to have a subcommittee for this specific goal? Because that's a big one in my mind. There's a lot of data to digest for these. You know, we get a agenda on Friday night, and I love looking at this stuff, but it's a lot. So how are we going to implement number 2?
And just to be clear, that's the SANDAG goals for ITALK, the number 2. Yeah. So that's implementing streamlining measures to enhance communication practices, but also enhance transparency.
So we actually, that goal is kind of marked as addressed. I believe back in October, there is a time when Ariana was still with us, we went over how agendas could be streamlined and how we could bring more items to consent. And then how we could, just basically make it so consent items are easier access, and how we can have reports be more detailed. And so we have more time to go over each item. Do you have more on that? No.
Yes, also the frequency of reporting and formatting of the reporting was a part of the streamlining. So we are adjusting the agenda to reflect those points. So that's how we've been kind of monitoring to make sure that that goal is being implemented.
So I guess going forward, and maybe my question is for the whole group, are we envisioning a smaller subcommittee, you know, a joint subcommittee maybe looking at this, or are there more things that we can implement to make it easier in addition to some of the things that Ariana put in place?
Just a point of clarification, Les, this item you're referring to is a SANDAG goal for ITALK. So I think they've been the ones who have been working on it. I don't know if we've really had input into that. I mean, we talk about just like Stuart did, but I have not seen a subcommittee necessarily or any discussions. You kind of took that goal and you were going to work on it. Obviously, there's work to be done. So what does SANDAG suggest to do?
So yeah, as far as I know, we don't have any plans for an additional subcommittee. I know you guys are pretty stretched as it is. But as Zara had mentioned, we have been working to streamline the agendas, hopefully not providing you guys as many reports if not needed. And if something comes up, we can make adjustments. So I think it's an ongoing item that as you see agendas come in, if you would like to provide staff with additional direction on how we can further streamline, we can start implementing those processes.
One thing we used to do was in the consent agenda, we had an update on the goals, every report, every meeting, but we don't have that anymore. So we've not seen an update on report. If you maybe can put in, this is what we've done, right? I don't think it's in the packet. So if you kind of go over what has been done to achieve the goals, then maybe we have an opportunity to comment on it or be able to have you update us. It doesn't have to be it can be part of the consent, but at least we can see what's being done and then we can provide some input.
So we've actually brought on consent an update to the ITALK goals in the past, I believe maybe in April. But we do plan on bringing quarterly updates to the ITALK goals and status updates on how the progress on those are being made.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yes, sir.
So in response to Michelle's request for feedback, if you'd indulge, just if I could use just as an example, if we could just look at, item 16 in today's agenda, just by way of example. And again, I respect the fact that, people put a lot of work into these things, but this is, I think, very typical of the report structure where we have something that's called key considerations. In my mind, almost by definition, key considerations can't be like 8 paragraphs worth of stuff. From my perspective, putting myself in the position of a decision maker, I think key considerations are like 3 bullet points. These are the most important considerations in weighing this decision. And so I think if you get where I'm coming from, I think the notion of key considerations is great. I think the practice has been this kind of overload that I was describing before, which I think it would genuinely be really an interesting exercise to try to get feedback from board members. But like I've been doing this for 10 years, and I can tell you this just from my own perspective. Key considerations is more like 3 bullet points than it is like 8 paragraphs. But I do respect the fact that you're trying to, one thing I've always said, there are lots of debates, about what staff does or doesn't do. And I think staff has always been amazing at providing all the information that we have ever asked for about anything. The biggest problem is that there's so much information. The key information often gets somewhat obscured. And so this, to my mind, this is a really good illustration of that. I would really think about taking we've completed this task check box off that and still be thinking about this. Similarly, I have to say, overview in different memos means different things. In this case, the overview, I think, does a pretty good job of setting up the decision. Oftentimes, overview is the long history of this item, which doesn't so much relate to the actual decision-making. The history of the item is a little bit more like, for those of you who want more information about context, please feel free to review the history. But it's often less germane to the actual decision that needs to be made in the moment. And so I know, Susan, you were sort of nodding a little bit as I said that. Hopefully you kind of get what I'm saying, right? That the concept of overview, it's great. If it's setting up the decision, great. But a lot of times in these memos, overview becomes, it's background. And in that context, I think as a decision maker, where you've got people who are constantly pressed for time, background is something that should be kind of at the end of the memo for people who actually want to get into what the background is. So anyway, I think this is a good example of some of those ways in which I think in very tangible ways, you can actually help everybody. So that way there's less pressure to throw more stuff into consent and reduce the number of reports. You can actually enhance the efficiency of each of these reports so people are better equipped to deal with the volume of stuff that legitimately should be dealt with.
No, I appreciate the feedback because certainly if we're not giving you what we think we're giving you, we certainly want to hear that. As you're saying, the overview, I'm picturing it as that's really the issue. And if you don't want to read further, then you're getting to the issue at the very beginning. We have tried to incorporate discussion memos as attachments to give the history, but perhaps it's just a continuous process of going back and making sure that we're providing you with what we think we are, what the intention is, because that's certainly the intention, is to make these reports a one-pager where you have the fiscal impact. This is the decision. This is the fiscal impact. This is the overview and some background. And anything else would be the attachments, like you've said. So somebody who's interested could go into more detail and learn more about it.
I think that would be a much better approach, Susan, because the member of the public may still need, as Dr. Bilaashka just said, maybe want to know more about what is this item, and I don't know if this can even be like a link instead of an attachment, because now everything is online. You've updated your website. If anybody's interested in the background, click on the link and go online and read it. But that makes your packet a lot smaller, a lot more precise. And I understand the need maybe to explain some of the things, but I totally agree with Stuart about the key considerations. Bullet format helps. And then if it's detailed explanation, that could be a separate section for anybody that wants to read it. Anything that can be put off outside of the packet as informational background information would really be helpful, just to be online somewhere, and just as a link, if that's possible. I think that would make our packets much, much smaller. Thank you.
Pedro? My comment has to do with the little bubbles that we have. I appreciate them. When it says implemented and upcoming, when it says in progress, is there a way that maybe we could put an estimate of when that would be completed? Because right now it just leaves it widely open with no idea to the reader of when something will be or will not be implemented.
Yeah, we could probably add a little section that goes over each recommendation's expected timeline and like how far we are.
Yeah.
We could add a little
something simple. I mean, even if it's a quarter within a fiscal year or something like that.
Would this be an example of a link back to more information on a web page, or would you want it within the actual report?
Within the report, it would be fine. It doesn't have to be too much, just a little date, an estimated date.
Okay.
If you want to link it, you can link it. I mean, that would certainly give you way more information than you need to. But I would rather not go to the link. And if I needed to, and I was more curious, then I would do it. But if I had something in here, that would be really helpful to me.
Okay.
Do you think something like expected end summer 2024 expected and okay?
Yeah, that would be fine. Now, as I'm reading this, and I don't know if I'm nitpicking here, on the major corridor, I'm trying to understand, develop crosswalks to compare planned major corridor projects outlined in the TransNet extension ordinance with current implementation status. Yeah, 110 on the package, the second bullet that has in progress for major corridor. I'm just questioning the use of crosswalk.
Yes, I'll take that, Michael. So as part of the audit, we were asked to create a crosswalk, which aligned the TransNet ordinance number to our actual CIPs. So each CIP has to point back to a TransNet ordinance number. And we have that. We were asked to put that on the TransNet dashboard. At the time, the dashboard couldn't accommodate that. So we now have a new TransNet dashboard, and we're working with our consultants to make sure that if someone were to look up a TransNet ordinance, they'd be able to see which projects fall under that TransNet ordinance. And
That's what you're calling the crosswalk.
That's what we're calling the crosswalk. Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, never heard the term being used that way. Being a geeky
We're crossing that
engineer.
line.
Being a geeky engineer is like, What? I'm literally thinking, okay, there's a signal there and they're crossing.
It's
I'm sorry.
It's
Thank you.
a mental crosswalk. Not a physical one. Yeah, and related to, I think, general completion timeline would be helpful, Michael. And, related to a lot of these, I'm thinking back to the last year's annual report where we had, most things in progress as well. Most of these things are in progress. And so I think it'd be helpful to figure out, what we, some narrative about the kind of next steps on these items, right? So, we can pick kind of any of them that are here, I guess. Like the biker EAP, for example, estimate the quantifiable impact of permit delays on the overall regional bikeway program. That task is in progress, estimating the impact of that. But what's next for that? What are we actually doing? What's kind of like the next actual tangible thing that is either underway or that we're going to do? And I think as a member of the public and reader, you would say, okay, well, I really understand what SANDAG is doing, not just kind of what their objectives are. I think that would also be helpful.
Absolutely. A more detailed report on implementation of the recommendations of those two audits, triennial performance audits, have been provided in the report that was submitted to the ITALK. I think it was in April. March or April. So yes, there is the whole table or the spreadsheet that was converted into PDF with the next steps. But definitely we can provide a link to that report, to this annual report.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback.
I think this is my 8th or 9th annual report. And every year they seem to be getting better. I know we have a lot of information that we try to impart on the public. I think we have done a great job of providing a mix of everything that TransNet touches. Do have a question on I don't know what the term is. How many people actually read this and how do we get it into more people's hands? It's good information, and I just curious if we track, do we get like counts on the number of yeah, and not that you have to report back on it, just more in general, expanding the distribution of this particular document.
Well, annually, the chair of ITALK does present the annual report to the board. So it does go out as part of the board agenda packet to each of the jurisdictions. So that is one way. And we also are asking our board members to forward that information within their jurisdictions. It's also posted on our website, and we do social media when it does get posted as part of the board.
Prior to becoming a member, I wasn't aware of the annual report, and I was very aware of a lot of the work that SANDAG was doing and a lot of the projects that were underway, but I didn't know that this existed. That's not to say that it's anything you guys did wrong or SANDAG did wrong. I just made I should have been more aware, but I would like to see more people see this and have the ability to see the work that gets done that they probably aren't aware of.
I like the idea of the social media. I mean, that you could reach LinkedIn and Instagram, all these different places can reach a much wider audience, even though it's not necessarily local.
And I'm not sure if you all are aware, but our social media group is doing TransNet Tuesdays, where on Tuesdays leading up to the 35th anniversary of TransNet, which is happening this November, every Tuesday they're posting something related to what's going on in the TransNet program on social media. So they are trying to work on expanding the visibility of the work that's going on. I would definitely think that they're going to be including this year's annual report in their social media when it's complete.
Yeah, so if you follow SANDAG?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, it's Instagram, Facebook, I believe it's Twitter, yep, and LinkedIn.
Jonathan?
Yes.
I can't refuse this. So you're competing against Taco Tuesday?
Yes, Stuart.
This is a bit of a digression, but when you talk about social media, I think about, and Pedro's comment in effect relates to the question of engagement. And And I'm just curious, is there a way for members of the public to actually sign up for notices about, board and various committee meetings? Is there, because, I get notices for the, ITOC and audit committee because I'm on those committees, but I'm just, because I actually went to the website and I couldn't find a place where I could just sign up for like notification, for example, of the transportation committee meetings, the executive committee meetings. And I think that might be something to think about in terms of engagement.
Well, we
to
can
inform the
certainly work with the clerk of the board to see if there's a way that that can be added to our website or how that would happen. So we'll definitely take that back and see if there's a way that we can do that.
That would be great. Thanks.
A question for staff. I mean, the key initiative section, this is page 115 of the packet. It notes the Housing Acceleration Program, HAP, and I know that's a relatively new program, but I don't recall ever receiving a report on HAP or kind of anything that's going on related to that. So I was interested, it's a key initiative in the ITOC annual report, and I was wondering what TransNet funding, if any, is being used to support HAP.
It's one of our grant programs and one of our key initiatives within SANDAG, but you'll notice that within this annual report, we also highlight some agency initiative projects. The HAP program is something, it does not currently have TransNet funds on it, but it definitely benefits our jurisdictions, and it's part of our grant distribution programs.
Okay, got it. Okay, any other comments on the annual report? Thank you to staff, to Michael, for putting this together. So it's a lot of work, and I think visually it's easy to read and to work through. So I always appreciate that. Looks like Dr. Bilaashka would like to make a public comment on this item. I'm going to usurp your role here, Francesca, and call on him myself.
Thank you. Great discussions today. Timothy Bilaashka, Mid-County Coastal. I just wanted to, as someone who makes interfaces for databases sometimes, I find that we are designing electronic access a little bit like a maze. And the graphical aspects hide the fact that they're really command line interfaces, where you go for this, you make a selection, you go for that, and you sort of have to have a context in your brain to navigate the websites. And it's very difficult to do. Nobody pays for it, and it's kind of invisible if it's just there. So a button on wherever you are that says, send me updates for this. And the updates don't have to be even complete sometimes, but just, I spend about a half hour to an hour every morning and making my schedule, even just for the next week, trying to put those all together. And there are SANDAG is so huge, and the outreach to the cities and agencies and whatever, you could make a life contribution just trying to understand the organization itself. So the simpler it is, a button that takes you to the thing, making it easier for the navigation part of it, not even necessarily the information. These were great discussions. I really appreciate you doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bilaashka. Madam Clerk, do we have any other public comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair. No additional public comments.
Okay, seeing nothing else, I think we'll go ahead and conclude item 15, and we'll move on to item 16 today, and that is the TransNet proposed 2023 series bond issuance and the overview. We're going to be asked to discuss the refunding of some 2008 series variable debt obligations, and I'll turn the presentation over to Mr. Dijon.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to start off by thanking Dustin and Stuart for their service. And actually, Stuart, I'm excited that you are here for this final presentation, because what we're proposing to do here today really does simplify our portfolio and kind of eliminate some other risks that we potentially have, as well as giving us future flexibility in our debt portfolio. So in general, when we do these presentations and put together bond issuance, we assemble a team. So besides the SANDAG staff that has been working on this presentation, as always, we have our financial advisors. In fact, Peter Schellenberger, the managing director of PFM, our financial advisors, is on the line with us today on Zoom. So if there's any additional questions that you may have later, he'll be available. And since we are contemplating a swap here, we also have George Hu, who's a director at PFM on the swap advisory desk. We also have to have a bond counsel, disclosure counsel, and we did a procurement for those, and we selected Stradling for the bond counsel. Norton Rose is the disclosure counsel. And we have 14 banks currently in our underwriting team, and we solicited for the team as well, and all 14 of them responded. And so for this particular issuance, Wells Fargo will be the senior underwriter with Goldman Sachs as the co-senior manager, and we have B of A, Ramirez, and JP Morgan as our co-managers. So today I'm going to go through basically 5 different categories. The first is why we're proposing to issue these bonds. And in essence, it's going to be a refunding and a swap termination. We'll go through the potential size and structure of the new issuance. I'll touch on the credit ratings, and although the bond documents are not ready yet, I'll just kind of go through them and let you know what the Transportation Committee and board will see. And then a calendar of events with ultimately we expect this financing to be closed before the end of this fiscal year or the end of June. So this particular bond portfolio here should look familiar to you. We provide it to you on a quarterly basis on our quarterly market update report. In fact, that was in your package today. So you can see in this report, there's a total of $2.3 billion of debt that we have outstanding. This was since TransNet 2. You can see the first issuance was in 2008. And generally, we've been to the bond market every 2 years, either issuing new money or refunding debt. And so the last one that we did was in 2021. The series of debt that we're targeting right now is the very first series that we did, the 2008 bonds, which are actually variable rate bonds that we have a swap on top of it, which makes it synthetically fixed rate. So if I can just spend a moment as to why we did that issuance back in 2005 is when, so in 2004, TransNet 2 was approved. In 2005, we wanted to have budgetary certainty as well as interest rates were fairly low back then. And the only way that you could actually do a bond issuance in the future was to do it through a swap. So we did a swap in 2005, and then in 2008, we actually issued $600,000 worth of variable rate bond. But to take out the risk of having a variable rate bond, we put the swaps on top of them. So generally, the swaps have been working as intended and have provided us a fixed rate. However, there's some risks associated with those bonds, and as we're going through it, I'll describe why it's an opportune time for us to take them out. While we're in the market to take out the 2008 bonds, we're also looking to refinance or refund part of the 2019 taxable bonds to tax-exempt bonds, which will be at a lower rate. So if you look at the composition of our bond right now, of the 2.3 billion, 16% is synthetically fixed rate. The other 1.9 billion is fixed rate. And then on the right side, you'll see approximately 63% is taxable and 37% is tax exempt. So again, the portion that we're looking to take out is the ones that are dark. And so the interesting thing is, SANDAG is AAA rated. And although these are synthetically fixed rate bonds, when the rating agencies look at our portfolio, they do see variable rate bonds in there. So they say that up to 20% of bonds is acceptable to be variable. So although we consider it synthetically fixed rate, the rating agencies actually look at them as variable rate debt. So eliminating them gives us the opportunity in the future with the approval of TIFIA to issue variable rate. And obviously in a higher rate environment that we are today, you probably wouldn't, but we see that rates will eventually, go down, and ultimately as the program shrinks, there may be the opportunity to issue variable rate debt. So this is a good time for us to kind of take these out while the opportunity exists. So again, why are we issuing these bonds? Is to lower SANDAG's borrowing costs through the debt service savings. So in essence, if you look at the PFM memo, you can see over the last couple of years that the swaps have been in a pretty negative position, as negative as $125 million. They've actually gone positive over the last several months. Today, they're in a little bit of a negative position. But the point is that we can take out those swaps at right now that they're about $10 million negative. But when we fix out the bonds with the new debt service that we have, we'll actually have an overall savings. And the overall savings, it'll depend really on the day that we go to the market. We're estimating right now it could be potentially $20 million, but really that's changing day to day as interest rates change. But in essence, we will, after this debt issuance, lower the debt service. We'll simplify SANDAG's portfolio by eliminating interest rate swaps. I guess, when we issue a fixed rate bond, we're pretty much done. Twice a year, we make interest payments. Once a year, we make principal payments. When it's a variable rate bond, every week, SANDAG staff has to touch those. Those rates go out to a remarketing agent. The remarketing agent sells the bonds or whatever rates are. Staff has to account for them. So there's a lot of work that goes to having a variable rate bond, as well as every 2 to 3 years, we have standby bond purchase agreements just in case the bonds are not sold. We have to have agents that can take those bonds. And so we're renegotiating the standby bond agreement. So there's a lot of complexity that goes on behind the scenes. And again, we needed to do this issue in 2005, but now that we have the opportunity to get out, it's like, let's take it. In addition, one more thing, the LIBOR phase out, it's transitioning to SOFR. Our swaps are tied to LIBOR right now, which has been a pretty good index. SOFR is an unknown index. And so having spoken to a number of experts in this field, they may not tie as well anymore to our bonds. And so we may be paying a higher cost. So it's like another reason for us to get out. And I could almost put a fourth bullet up there, this question that Stuart asked earlier about the regional banks. Now, we are not tied to any regional banks, but obviously, usually when there's more regulation, that's going to happen because of the regional banks. The costs are filtered to all the banks. And so the standby bond purchase agreements that are with the bigger banks will probably cost us more money. So for multiple reasons, I think it's an opportune time for us to come out of these bonds. So just a summary of them is we'll be refunding the 2008 variable rate bonds. We'll be terminating the interest rate swaps associated with all of them. And again, as I mentioned, there's an opportunity for us to have additional savings with the Series 2019 bonds. Although there's 432 or 436 million outstanding, we don't expect to be able to take out all of those. We expect to take out a portion of those. Again, those will be based on market conditions at the time. So as of right now, we're estimating the par amount could be 350 million to 820, more likely in the $400 million range. The net present value savings in the 20 to $30 million range. And generally, when we have a refunding, our net present value savings are in the 5, 6, 7% range. This is a 3.5% savings, not a tremendous amount of savings, but I think besides the savings, again, why we're doing this is to eliminate some of the risk. Our debt policy says we have to have at least a 3% savings. We're at 3.5%, but our debt policy also says that if there's other reasons which we think is risk, you could also do refunding. So we are within our policy to do that. These will be senior lien bonds, and potentially we're going to have a tender option on them as well. So as I've mentioned a number of times, as we're very proud of our AAA ratings, only 5% of municipal issuers throughout the country have 2 AAA ratings, which we have on our senior lien. We also have a subordinate lien. We're AA rated with that. So obviously what we're doing with this issuance, we're de-risking our portfolio. So we can't be rated any higher. if we could, we would probably be a AAA plus based on what we're doing, but we're as high as we can. So again, we will be speaking to both rating agencies, and we expect that our ratings will be affirmed. As I mentioned, you can see Peter is on the line right now. We have his, the financial advisor memo attached to our item today. He basically talks about the market update, what's going on, the conditions. There's a swap termination discussion, the refunding structure for the 2023. There's a potential tender on the table, and then the financial considerations. And again, Peter's on the line if there's any further questions on those. So you do have the PFM memo today. What you don't have is item 2 through 7. In fact, we have a call this afternoon with the entire legal team, our financial advisors in the Bond Council, Disclosure Council, our banking team to go through this. We have had a couple turns of these documents. These documents are basically what we need for the board to approve before we can go to the bond market and sell the bonds. So unfortunately, we don't have any drafts to share with you today, but there will be in the transportation and board packages that are going out to them next month. And finally, the next steps, just want to show, May 15th, what I've presented to you today is an informational item. We'll go to the Transportation Committee. We'll also provide the informational item to the board the May 22nd. Then the following week on May 29th, we will take the Transportation Committee, all the documents, and we'll ask Transportation Committee to recommend to the board to accept those documents. The week of June 5th, we will go to the board, hoping that they'll approve the bond financing. With that, we will post the notice to the bond market that we're coming. And we expect to actually price these the last week in June. And again, they'll be beneficial for us to close before June 30th, so we don't have to worry about the transition from LIBOR to SOFR. So I know that's a lot that I've discussed today, but I'm certainly here for questions. And like I mentioned, PFM is on the line as well.
Thank you so much, Andre, for that presentation. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair. No public comments on this item.
Okay, we'll bring it back to committee members for questions, either for PFM or Andre. Stuart?
Thanks. Two questions, or maybe one of them a comment. But one thing, Andre, I'm looking at page, well, it's 125 in the package. It's the PFM memo that references, you in your comments talked about a 3-something% savings, right? I'm seeing, again, it's 125 in the package. I don't know what page, it's page 5 of the PFM memo. They're referencing 5.77%. Are those not apples to apples numbers, or just can you reconcile that?
No, and you know what, since you're on the line, Peter, I'll have you help me with that discrepancy there.
Yeah, absolutely. And good morning. Again, it's Peter Schellenberger from PFM. Good to be with you virtually. The way we evaluate debt service savings and then put it in percentage terms as you're referencing is we look at the baseline debt service costs under the existing structure, which goes to 2038. Currently, as Andre pointed out, the all-in rate for the interest rate swaps is about 4%. We would need to take out $383 million of variable rate bonds. We would need to fund about $11.5 million termination payment to the swap providers. And so the comparator to just sticking with what you have at 4% is taking out the 383 million plus the 11.5, but doing so at a rate about 3.3% through 2038. And then we calculate the annual debt service and the payments through 2038 and discount that back. And so when we come up with the difference in debt service, base case to the alternative proposed, it's about 22.5 million. And then we divide that 22.5 million as a percentage of the baseline par amount. And that gets us to a statistic. It's a little bit technical, not terribly so. And we shoot for 3%, and right now it's about 5.7%.
Okay, got it. Maybe I misunderstood your comment that the savings would be 3%. You're saying the savings needs to be at least 3%, but it really would be that 5.77% that you got. Okay, got it.
Yes, yes, thank you.
Okay, and then the other thing, I don't know if it's necessary, but going back to your why slide. Now, giving you a lot of tough love here this morning on your memo. I would say that why slide kind of fits more closely with what I think both Sunny and I were saying are the key considerations, right? If you just had those bullet points as the key considerations, I think that just simplifies what you're trying to do here to decision makers. And then you could have the further elaboration below it. But I think that highlights what we were getting at earlier about, how you can make these memos a little bit more understandable for people. Yeah, but thanks. I appreciate that.
Pedro? It is my assumption that once this happens and you figure out how much you're going to be able to do, then you're going to readjust the budget so that this savings that is going to be reflected so that it potentially can be used towards projects or programs or whatever it is that you may need that.
So that's a great question. I think there will be annual debt service savings going forward. And so this will happen at the end of this calendar year. The budget will already be passed. The savings will be a couple $1 million, I believe, on an annual basis. And most of this money is major corridor money. So we can adjust the budget. We will adjust the budget. In fact, when we do the plan of finance, it will be coming to you probably later this year. You'll see the new debt service numbers in there.
Well done.
Thank you.
Andre, what are if any, what in your mind are any risks associated with any of these kind of assumptions? Meaning, the fixed rate bond, we're thinking it's like about 3.25. We're going to get $1.8 million annual savings. Are there any risks? I mean, as we kind of move forward, as you're thinking about in the markets generally, or with rates that could change some of these outcomes or assumptions?
Yeah, no, certainly. Markets have been very volatile. In fact, as long as I've been doing this, we haven't seen rates move as quickly and as fast as they have over the last probably 18 months. And it's very headline driven. One day a news comes out that, the Dow is up 500 points, another day is down 500 points, and interest rates move accordingly. So I think the risk to us is the day, we're a AAA rated entity, and SANDAG name is very well received in the market. And again, what we're doing here is de-risking our portfolio. So I think investors are going to really enjoy buying our bonds from us. I think the big risk to us is what the market is going to do then when we go to price. These numbers have moved quite a bit since we even started the conversations probably 3 months ago. So I think the biggest risk to us is more of what the market is going to do when we go to price. We've chosen a date too in the calendar that there's not too much Fed speak. So generally there's a lot of volatility around those days. So I think I'm not concerned that we'll be able to sell our bonds. We'll be able to sell it. It's just hopefully we'll be able to get the prices that we are expecting at this point.
Thank you. Yes, Sunny.
I guess to build on that, I still have a very hard time understanding the whole bond market, but I do understand when interest rates go up, it's a good time to buy bonds, right? Kind of instead of the market, maybe the stock, you kind of switch over to bonds, if you want to have a balanced portfolio. So what happens when the interest rates go down? Your obligations are higher at a higher interest rate. So how does that work?
Yes. So right now, interest rates are probably the highest they've been since 2016. In fact, the 1 month treasury today is at 5.5%, whereas a year and a half ago it was 0.5. It was 5 basis points. So it's 100 times more today. So our portfolio overall is at about 3% fixed. These bonds are going to be about 3.25%, so a little bit higher than what our overall portfolio is. So the reason why we're actually doing, I mean, generally you don't want to be an issuer when rates are high, right? But today we're doing it because the swaps have come up to a point where they're almost in a positive, just a little bit negative, so we are able to take them out. But even rates are not that high that we still have a debt service savings. So what all of our bonds have is a optionality, a 10-year call. So if interest rates eventually, like we see, this is probably the height, the Fed has probably said that this is a pause right now. We expect interest rates to go down. So some of the other bonds that we have in our portfolio, like the 2016s, at some point we can refinance those at a lower rate. So although they were at a higher rate now, we always have the option to refinance, and we've done that several times. You cannot advance refund anymore. You have to wait for your 10-year call date, but that does give an option for us. So in other words, we're in 2023 right now. In 2033, we can potentially refinance some of the bonds that we're issuing today.
Wes. Thanks, Jonathan. Andre, this probably isn't relevant to the refund, but I just noticed, and you'd mentioned this in your presentation, that the largest item on the debt summary table is the TIFIA loan for a little over $500 million. Could you provide some color on that, like what that is or how it works vis-a-vis the bonds?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So TIFIA is probably the, and let me pull it up if I can, so we could see the rates. So it's the very last item in the bottom of this chart here. So we initially took out the TIFIA loan because TIFIA in general is the absolute lowest form of financing that you can do. So it's cheaper than the bond market. The other positive thing about TIFIA is we actually have 3 liens and they sit on the most subordinate lien. So the senior bondholders get paid first, then everything that is above that TIFIA gets paid second, and then TIFIA gets paid third. So it's basically a government program. It's a federal program to help issuers like us that build projects to borrow money at the most cost-effective, cheapest manner. It's basically tied to the 30-year treasury. When we first took out the TIFIA loan, we were at a 2.72% rate, but we hadn't drawn on it yet. But what happened when COVID initially hit, if you recall, 30-year treasury went down to almost 1%, and then it gradually started climbing. Well, at that point, Don Vitesse is on the line as well, hounded the TIFIA office to refinance our loan, although we hadn't even drawn on it yet. So that TIFIA loan right now is actually at a 1.75% rate, which is the absolute lowest that we have. And you know, again, today, the 30-year treasury, if we had to borrow today, I think the 30-year treasury is at about a 385. So we would borrow at almost double the rates that we are today, but we're locked in all the way through, I believe, 2048 on that TIFIA loan. So that is a program that has been very beneficial to the Mid-Coast Trolley Project. In fact, right now, Dawn is working very closely with the TIFIA office to try to get a loan for our Otay Mesa East project. The rate is going to be a lot higher than we borrowed back then at 3.85% if we were to lock in today, but that's a very beneficial loan that we have, and something that we got kind of fortunate as well when rates went down the way they did. And actually, we were the first in the country to refinance a TIFIA loan that had not been drawn on yet. So kudos to our team and to Dawn for effectuating that, because that's a tremendous amount of savings. Our portfolio average is 3%, and that is almost half of it at 1.75.
Thank you. That was very informative and good news.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments on this item? Francesca, do we have any public comments on this item?
We do. Thank you. Tim, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you for entertaining another comment. Tim Bilaashka, Mid-County Coastal. I'm not a good investor, so I admit that. However, I've seen a lot of ups and downs over time. In general, I think the government's been doing a good job the last 2 years. But one of the things that I can't, all these moving parts, what is the risk to a situation where a big default comes on one of the major banks even, or something that affects the major banks, or going into a period of deflation rather than inflation, which nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition if you're a Monty Python fan. So I just wonder if that has any bearing on these deliberations.
Thank you, Dr. Bilash. Okay, seeing no other comments. Thank you so much, Andre, and to Mr. Schellenberger for being here. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, that concludes item 16, and we'll move on. Item 17 is just our future meeting schedule, and our next iTalk meeting is Wednesday, June 14 here at 9:30 a.m. And that concludes today's agenda. So we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yes, of
Okay,
course.
so in the last 15 minutes, I found out that you can subscribe to all of the meetings and projects by going to the SANDAG website. So you go to the SANDAG website, scroll all the way to the bottom on the right-hand side, it says subscribe, and then it gives you a list of meetings that you can subscribe to get notifications. So. there you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're
All of us must subscribe now.
welcome.
That
Yeah,
Susan
just
has found that for us.
Exactly.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.